The first step for this project is going to be creating your final design on a piece of 4-inch by 6-inch paper. And this final design is going to be transferable to your linoleum piece that you're going to be carving your stamp out of. Now, for your design plan, all you need to do is start out just by drawing lightly with a pencil, and eventually you're going to go over your lines again to darken them with a darker 3B or 6B pencil. And the darker lead is going to allow us to transfer the design to the linoleum. The reason why we transfer our design is because it's a lot easier when you have words in your design and you don't have to write the words backwards and the letters backwards as well. And you'll see what I'm talking about in just a little bit. So my design is respect our earth with the image of the earth below the two words. And I'm just kind of doing a rough sketch of the earth. And now I'm going to go over all of my lines and my words and really make a thick line with my darker leaded pencil. And since I'm doing this, it's going to make it a lot easier to transfer to the linoleum, and it'll really stand out and help me out when I need to carve my design. Now I have it all outlined and ready to go, ready to transfer. And I'm going to take my linoleum, and it doesn't matter which side that you use, and you're going to flip your design over on top of it and make sure you don't move it around. You're going to hold it in place. And we're going to start doing something called burnishing. Burnishing is going to transfer the lead onto the linoleum, which makes it easier when we start carving with the lino cutters. Now, burnishing is pretty simple. I'm using kind of my fingernail and the tips of my fingers to burnish the design onto the linoleum. And so you'll want to do the same. And you can even just use the pads of your fingertips as well. And you want to make sure you do every single detail. You can hold it in place and check and see how far you've gotten. Don't worry if part of it hasn't quite transferred to the linoleum. Some places you maybe just didn't get as much lead, and so you just do your best and try and transfer it as best as you can. If it doesn't transfer at all, you'll probably have to go back and redo your design plan and darken the lead a little bit more. Mine looks pretty good though. It's a faint transfer, but it'll work. You'll notice my words are backwards and my letters are backwards. The reason why we have that is because it's a mirror image. When we go to print it, it's going to print the right way. So it's pretty handy by transferring. We don't have to worry about that. Now I'm going to start using my lino cutters, and lino cutters have different blades attached to the top. There are wide blades, V-shaped blades, U-shaped blades, and very small blades for small details. To change out the blades, all you need to do is twist the metal middle part to the left and then remove the old blade and put the new blade back in securely and tighten that back up, and then you're ready to start using that blade. Now it's really important that when you're carving that you always carve away from you, always cut away from you. That way, in case you slip or you make a mistake, you're not going to jab yourself in the hand. These lino cutters are pretty sharp, so you can hurt yourself if you don't use them correctly. So try and make sure to carve away from yourself as much as possible. And I'm just starting with the straight lines in my words using a medium-sized lino cutting blade. And you'll start collecting the little scraps of linoleum, and we're just going to throw those away when we're all done. Now I got to do the curved parts, and doing the curved parts it's a little more difficult, and I find it best to turn your linoleum as you're carving. That way you don't have to turn your hand as much. It's a little less strenuous when you're using the lino cutters. So turning it as you go, if you have a lot of curved areas, works pretty well. And I'm trying to keep my hands as steady as possible while I'm carving those curves and turning the linoleum as I go. Sometimes the linoleum likes to stick, the little scraps like to stick to the main stamp, and sometimes you have to kind of stop and pull those away or brush them off just to get rid of them. If you leave them on there, it can actually ruin your prints, so you need to make sure that you take off the little scraps of linoleum. Now, the nice thing about transferring our designs is that you can always change things. So if I wanted to change the font, maybe make it thinner or wider, I can always do that. And so it's pretty versatile. It's a nice way to get started, but you can always change it too, which is nice if you change your mind about something. Now I'm using the smaller blade to cut the smaller letters out, just because if I used a large blade, it wouldn't work with my smaller font size. So I'm using a smaller blade. I personally think that the smaller blades are a little more difficult to use just because they require such a steady hand and usually involve a little more detail. I tend to prefer actually a medium or a larger blade, but since my text is so small, I'm using this smaller blade, and I'll use the smaller blade to cut out the continents in the earth that I have below my words in my design. Now I'm going to start carving out the earth, and I'm using a much larger blade, the largest one I have, to cut the circle for the earth. And I'm rotating my linoleum just because it makes it a lot easier. I'm trying to keep the blade away from my hand so in case I did slip, I wouldn't jab myself or cut myself accidentally. You can use a larger blade to take away really large areas too. So if you have a lot to carve away, a large blade is the way to go. So now I'm going to start carving out all of my small continents with my smaller blade. And I'm just doing the outline of the continents. I could technically carve away the inside too if I wanted that to be the color of the paper that I'm printing on. That's one thing to keep in mind when you're carving. Wherever you carve away, uh, that is going to be the color of the paper that you print on. So we'll be using some white paper, so wherever you carve is going to be white. So just keep that in mind. Remember that it will be the color of the paper. And now I'm just finishing up carving out the lines, kind of the sun rays that are coming outside of the earth. And I'm pretty much done carving. I'm touching up some areas, making sure that it's ready to start printing, and then I'm going to do a test print. And we're using some block printing ink, and this ink is water-based and it will stain your clothes, so you do need to be careful. A small amount of ink goes a long way, so you don't need to use a lot. We're going to be using a brayer to roll out the ink, and it's basically like a mini rolling pin, and it works really well for rolling out the ink and getting it ready to apply to our stamp. You need to roll out the ink, otherwise it'll be too thick and your stamp basically won't work. So you need to make sure that you roll out the ink until it has kind of a sticky or tacky sound, and you'll hear it once you start really rolling it out. And you want to smooth it out as much as you can on the plexiglass plate. And once you have it rolled out, then you're going to roll the ink onto the stamp. And you can see kind of around my words, I didn't get enough ink there, so I need to make sure that I cover that completely with ink. And this really helps me see my design, what it's going to look like once it's on paper when I apply the ink. And it helps sometimes to go up and down and then side to side, making sure that you got enough ink covered on your stamp. Now I'm going to take a piece of paper. I'm working pretty quickly so it doesn't dry. And I'm going to lay the paper right on top and make sure that I don't move the paper around. And then I'm going to do some more burnishing. So again, I'm just moving my fingers across the top, pushing down pretty lightly. I'm not pressing very hard, and I'm just making sure that I get across my entire design so it transfers the whole design to the paper. Now, if you have a lot of blank spots, it could mean you didn't use enough ink, or it could mean that you didn't burnish well enough. So if you see that your design doesn't show up very well, those are two possible reasons why. There's my first print, my test print. Looks pretty good. It looks like I could have gotten a little bit more ink onto my stamp. So next time I'll add some more ink. Now there's a couple different ways you can use your ink. You can do multiple colors, you can mix colors. In this example, I'm using two colors. So I'm going to have some blue and then some purple, and it's just going to be split in half. You could split it in half diagonally. You could do technically 10 colors all together in different ways. It's totally up to you what kind of color combinations you want to do. That's the really fun part about printmaking, is that once you have the stamp, you can pretty much go crazy with the different colors and it goes pretty quick. So I'm going to try out this two-toned blue and purple combination on my paper. Again, lay the paper on top of the stamp, and then you're going to burnish. And then there is my two-tone print ready to go. Can also mix the colors, so I'm mixing some blue and white here, and I'm kind of doing an ombre or gradient effect, and I'm going to apply that to my stamp to make it look like kind of an ombre style color scheme. So it starts from light blue and goes to darker blue. You will want to wash your stamp in between colors, so if you use totally different colors, you'll want to wash it off with some warm water. The nice thing about linoleum is that it's totally washable. And there's my ombre style print. The last thing you need to do with all 6 of your prints is title, sign, date, and number your print. So my first print's going to be 1 out of 6. The second one would be 2 out of 6. Third one would be 3 out of 6, and so on. So you need 6 prints total, and you'll be turning in all 6 for a grade. And thanks for watching.